reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Once, when Jesus was praying in solitude and the disciples were with him, he asked them, "Who do the crowds say that I am?" They said in reply, "John the Baptist, others Elijah, still others, one of the ancient prophets has arisen." Then he said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Peter said in reply, "The Christ of God." He rebuked them and directed them not to tell this to anyone. He said, "The Son of Man must suffer greatly and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised." Then he said to all, "If anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake will save it." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
As many of you know, last weekend I was not here. Father Tom Hurst was here, who did the mission appeal. Thank you for your generosity to that mission appeal and for welcoming him last weekend. I was a retreat master for the Harrisburg Diocesan Council of Catholic Women, 127 women and one priest. So I didn't have very much competition for the bathroom, which was great. We had a great retreat. But the weeks before last week, we started the Homily Mega Series. The point of the Mega Series is to focus us on the most important things. The most important thing. So the first 4 weeks were about the purpose of the church. The purpose of the church, which is what?
The salvation of souls.
Very good, you remembered. It's been 2 weeks. Now we're transitioning into 5 weeks about the mission of the church. The mission of the church. And so appropriately, these readings come up. The reading about self-denial. And the reading about the dailiness of the cross. Jesus says, "Take up your cross daily and follow me." And so before we get ahead of ourselves in talking about the mission of the church and the purpose of the church being the salvation of souls, we first have to notice what God has already put in front of us every day. Back in September, I preached a homily because the reading was the same except it was from Mark. And I preached about how you can know what your cross is. What is it that Christ is asking you to take up? So I want to just review that, because I think it bears repeating. The cross in your life there's 3 things about it. First of all, it's something that you didn't choose to put there. Something that is in your life that you didn't ask to be there. That's the first thing about it. The second thing, it's some type of reality that's in your life, a set of circumstances. The second thing about your cross is that this set of circumstances calls out for your attention. You have to make some kind of decision about it. You're constrained to do that. You have to decide something about it. And because it's something that's unpleasant and uncomfortable, you are more likely and you're prone to ignore it. Ignore that set of circumstances. You're more prone to just get it out of my life, get it away. I don't want to deal with that right now. So that's the second thing about your cross. And a third very important characteristic of your cross is it's not something that is morally evil. It's not something that is immoral. So, for example, your cross is not you tolerating abuse from somebody. Your cross is not allowing yourself to be a victim of a crime. Okay, that is not a cross that the Lord is asking you to carry. He might be asking you instead to work for the salvation of the soul of that criminal or abuser and take that challenge. That might be your cross to correct that, to call the police, whatever. I just want to say that this cross that's in your life is not something of that nature. Jesus gives us another characteristic of the cross today, and that it is something that is there every day. It's daily. So part of our cross, even before the cross aspect of it, is just our daily duty. Just doing what we're supposed to do in our vocation in life. And especially doing our duty to God by being at Mass every Sunday, for example. But beyond that, there is something, that set of circumstances, that cross that you are called to carry. You can't fulfill the mission of the church. We can't work for the mission of the church. We can't work for the salvation of souls. We can't go in that direction until first we accept the cross that God has already put in our life. And if we carry our cross faithfully, we can then be an example to others. We can then talk about the mission of church in the sense of extending the kingdom of God and showing that kingdom to other people. But first, we cannot get ahead of ourselves. We have to do the basics of our daily duty and taking up that cross that we have. So Jesus says today, take up your cross and follow me. If you want to be my disciple, you must take up your cross and follow me. But you could ask a really good question. It says, follow me. Well, if we follow him, where are we going? Where does taking up our cross lead us? I'll show you where it leads us. When we take up our cross, it leads us to this. It leads us to die on the cross in some way. It leads to self-denial. Now, that's not the ultimate goal, because behind that on the wall, you see what comes after the cross. And whoever set up the church this way did it so beautifully. You have the cross, but it doesn't end at the cross. When you look into the sanctuary, you have the risen Jesus. Somebody asked me recently who that was up there. They thought it was supposed to be the Blessed Mother. I can assure you that's actually supposed to be the risen Lord up there. So you have the cross and the resurrection. So when we in this church, even physically, looking here in the front, we see the cross, but you cannot fail to notice what happens after the cross, the resurrection. And that resurrection points us to the purpose of the church, the salvation of souls. So taking up our cross is our role, is part of our role, is part of our mission for the salvation of souls. If you and I take up our cross, if you and I fulfill our daily duty to God, that consistency will develop a certain kind of character in us. A certain kind of character which will say that I know the most important thing is not a lifetime of happiness. I know that the most important thing is not my own personal desires being fulfilled in this life. I know that there's something beyond this life. And if you and I become totally convinced of that, our lives are going to change. One of the things that could become a frustration for me is I've spent 4 weeks talking about the purpose of the church, the salvation of souls, the most important thing, eternal life and happiness. And it could be a frustration of mine if I'm saying this and I'm trying to focus all of us on the most important thing. It could be a frustration of mine if we just go out when we leave this church and we continue to live our lives as if earthly happiness is the most important thing. If we can continue to do that, if what I'm saying about focusing on the most important things doesn't translate into your daily decision making, once you step out of the doors of this church, or once you get into the car, and the decisions you make throughout your week, if it doesn't change that, then I am failing. I'm not getting anywhere. Please help me out. That's what we're going to focus on, because what is more important, my friends? What is more important in the salvation of souls? What is it? If you can think of something, please let me know. If we die to ourselves, we are working for the salvation of souls, our own soul and the souls of others. I want to show you a clear demonstration of that. Of somebody who said no to himself, who died to himself, and because of that developed a certain kind of character which allowed him to be so confident and courageous in the midst of a terrible persecution. It was a Lutheran bishop who was in a Nazi concentration camp during World War II. Just as a side note, a lot of people are not aware of the fact that the Nazis didn't just go after Jews. That was the primary target. But there were also other targets like Catholic clergy, Protestant clergy, homosexuals, gypsies. A lot of those kinds of people were also gassed in the gas chambers. And in this case, this was a Lutheran bishop who was in a Nazi concentration camp. He was being tortured by an SS officer. First, it was kind of a mild kind of thing, an interrogation. Then the SS officer kept getting more and more intense because the bishop was not giving in at all. He refused to give any information. He refused to acknowledge this guy and acknowledge his demands. So the SS officer kept getting more and more intense with the torture. But the bishop maintained his silence. Finally, the infuriated officer shrieked, "Don't you know that I can kill you?" The bishop looked in the eyes of his torturer and said, "Yes, I know. Do what you want, but I have already died. Do what you want, but I have already died." What does he mean by that? Because he's not dead yet. He means I've already died to myself. I don't see life in this world as the only way that I can be happy. I don't see temporary happiness as my ultimate goal. And this is what happened. Instantly, as though paralyzed, the SS officer could no longer raise his arm. Could no longer raise his arm. It was as if the power over the bishop had been taken from him. The power of the bishop was taken from him. All his cruelties had been based on the assumption that the bishop's physical life was his most precious possession, and therefore he would be willing to make any concession to save it. But with the grounds for violence gone, torture was futile. In other words, the whole premise that the SS officer was working under was that any human, including a Lutheran bishop, he sees his most important possession as his earthly life. And so that's when the torture works. But if that's not his most precious possession, he doesn't know what to do. That SS officer no longer had power over him. And you see, that's the way you and I can be. If we develop the character that this prisoner had, you and I will not be puppets of the world. You and I will not become enslaved to hedonistic desires. You and I will not be enslaved to the consumeristic culture. And that will be true Christian character. And that is what we mean by dying to self, self-denial, taking up your cross, Being willing to die for Christ. Not just to die for the sake of dying, but so that you can share eternal happiness with our Savior forever. Again, you have the cross, but then there's the resurrection. Focus on that resurrection. Focus on the salvation of souls. Realize that your most precious possession is not this life, is not being happy in this life. And my God, I pray that each and every one of us will live our lives with that priority, that focus, so that we're not expecting to be completely happy here. So that we can, like this Lutheran bishop, we can say, when the world comes at us, we can say, do what you want, but I'm willing to give up my life. I'm willing to set aside myself for a higher purpose. Because I know there is something more beyond death. There is something else, and that's what I want more than anything else. That should change every decision that we make in our life. It should change how we live. So if you could, I ask you this favor to help me out. Help me to succeed in that. As I'm standing up here, I don't want to just be saying these things and you think that they're great things and then you go home and then nothing changes. Our lives can change, and we can be so much happier even in this life if we focus on the most important thing, the salvation of souls, heaven. Not a happiness that is just going to last 100 years, but a happiness that will never end. Trillions and trillions and trillions of years of happiness. That's what we're aiming for. That's what the resurrection is about. That's what self-denial is about. That's what the mission of the church is. And it all goes back to that purpose, the salvation of souls. Friends, let us focus. Let us change our lives. Let the Lord change your life. Just realize there will be some pain. When that cross is there that you are prone to avoid, realize that the Lord is there saying, just take it up for now. Just take it up. If you take it and you embrace it the way that Jesus did, watch where it leads. Yes, it'll get a little more difficult at first. It will lead to the crucifixion in some way, however that happens in your life. But don't focus on that. Focus on what's after that. The resurrection.